Okay, moving on to the next team in the Big 12 we will be going over today. That would be Bruce Weber and his Kansas State Wildcats. And I have the Wildcats right now projected to finish in 10th place in the Big 12. And I'll say this about Kansas State. I still think they're in the middle of a rebuild right now, and I don't really think there's anyone across college basketball that is going to think that this season is going to be a big-time season for Kansas State. But keep in mind, Kansas State was the team that finally, after all of these years, was able to beat Kansas and break their streak and win the Big 12. And if you're a Kansas State Wildcat fan, that is something to be very proud of. But reality is that Barry Brown and Dean Wade and Kamal Stokes and even Cartier-Jara, those guys are no longer here anymore. And Kansas State, it's going to take some time, but if they really do believe in Bruce Weber and everything that he's done so far since he's been the head coach of the Kansas State Wildcats, then I believe that they're going to believe in him to come in here and get the job done and rebuild this program. Now, looking at the Kansas State roster, it's interesting because there are a lot of young guys that I think eventually can succeed. Kansas State also, before last year, had made 3 straight NCAA tournaments, and they advanced to the Elite Eight. They once again railed Kansas's Big 12 streak, and honestly, the price may just be, okay, the program isn't very good for the next 2 years. But at the same time, I feel like if you would have asked any Kansas State fan if they would have accepted that deal, if you would have told them, all right, you're going to win the Big 12. You're going to break Kansas' streak. You'll go to the NCAA tournament 3 years in a row. You'll even go to the Elite Eight, knock off Kentucky in a tournament game. I think each and every Kansas State Wildcat fan would call and accept that. So, looking at this year's team, there should hopefully be some light at the end of the tunnel with some of these young guys that they have coming in, but it could be ugly for the Wildcats. They have a really good recruiting class coming in, and I think over time, by the time they're juniors and seniors, the class is going to be very good. Mike McGurl and DeJuan Gordon are guys that could break out possibly. They return 4 key rotation guys in total with Mike McGurl and DeJuan Gordon, who's going to start right now at the 2 and the 3 position in the backcourt. And then in the front court, Montavious Murphy and Antonio Gordon will be the starting 4-5 combo. And they did split a little bit of time last year, and it's going to be very interesting for me to see how they do as sophomores. They also bring in Kaosi Iziagu, the UTEP transfer. He only played in 12 minutes a game last year, but he has the size at 6'10", and I feel like that guy is now one of Kansas State's top big men on a Big 12 team, and the fact that he didn't play great at UTEP and the numbers didn't really jump immediately off the page at UTEP, that is a concern for me going forward with this Kansas State team. But they do have a little bit more size with Gordon and Murphy both standing at 6'9", also a sophomore, and Carlton Lingard didn't really get much of an opportunity last year, but he's 6'11", maybe he could give you something. And if Iziagu could give you an impact, hopefully that would be a benefit for Kansas State, but I'm not 100% sure that could happen. And they also have Nigel Pack, who could start at point guard this year. He's a guy that could really play in this freshman class. And also the thing about this freshman class is that they got guys that could do a lot of different things. And I think for me, if you ask Zach, what exactly makes a freshman class so successful, that is really one of them. If you have many different guys that can do many different things, whose strengths elevate others' weaknesses, and vice versa. And they also have a kid, Luke Kazauki, who could really shoot the ball, and a wing in Sheldon McGill, who could play a little bit at the 3. So I think those 3, as their building blocks for the future, could be a movement in the right direction for this Kansas State Wildcat team. And I do think out of all of the freshmen that Kansas State has, Nigel Pack is the one to watch because he's underrated, who I think really flew under the radar relative to the Big 12 freshmen that are coming in with him this year. And he's from Indianapolis. He isn't your traditional point guard prospect, and his highlight reel isn't really flashy, but what he lacks in flair he makes up for in substance. And he's a really good ball handler, and his drives are usually set up by hesitation and deception, which lulls defenders to sleep before he gets into the lane with that effective first step. Pack's mid-range game is especially very good, and he's armed with a floater that allows him to score over longer defenders. But this year, I feel like Kansas State right now is the last place team in the Big 12, just because I don't really know how many guys, when I look at this roster, I could count on to definitely get the job done. And this year, Kansas State, they have Mike McGurl as their best player, who last year on an 11-21 win team averaged 7 points a game. And for me, that just speaks for itself. One kid they bring in that I really like is Rudy Williams, 6'3 junior JUCO prospect. I think he could really play. He averaged 21, 7, and 9 at JUCO. And to hedge against any size and durability concerns, Bruce Weber brings in Rudy Williams, and he's a JUCO kid, and he's touted as one of the top JUCO prospects in the country, number 4 in 24/7 Sports, thanks to a guy that could really do many different things. He could pass and he could shoot. But we did say that about David Sloan of Kansas State last year, who is also a JUCO prospect. And if you're a Kansas State basketball fan, you know, unfortunately, David Sloan didn't really work out for Kansas during his time there. But regardless, when you're counting on that kind of guy to be your best player, you're in trouble. If you're Kansas State, you're going to need a jump from a guy like DeJuan Gordon. You're going to need a jump from a guy like Antonio Gordon and basically everyone else. Now, they have a 4-man freshman class who is good. Bruce Weber has some time, but there's a chance they could be pretty bad this year, and maybe not the worst Power 5 team in the country, but they may be close. Kansas State went 11-21 last year, lost their 3 leading scorers in Cartier Jara, McCall Mayween, and Xavier Sneed. I don't understand why they didn't take a grad transfer instead of Ezeagwu at the midseason mark like they did. Why even take him? That's just a waste. Take a sit-out guy and develop him and make him, a little more aware with the program. Also, Levi Stockard decides to leave Kansas State for VCU, and David Sloan is now going to be a starter for an East Tennessee State team that right now, even though they're in a mid-major league, I have to be honest, they look like a better team right now than Kansas State. And I'm not going to lie, Kansas State right now, I totally understand. They're in some rough shape. They need Nigel Pack to turn into Barry Brown and some of the other freshmen to turn into consistent 4-year starters. While Bruce Weber landed a promising freshman class, I don't know if there's a Michael Beasley walking through that door. And it'll take time for the new wave of talent to pop up, but Bruce Weber does deserve some patience from this Kansas State fan base after what he's been able to do the last couple of years, winning with that Kansas State squad. And I feel like Kansas State fans will realize, all right, the long-term approach is to get guys in this program, develop them, and then as time goes on, they're only going to get better and better and better. And I feel like the fact that Bruce Weber, he's entering his 9th year as the head coach of Kansas State, I feel like Wildcat fans have been against him really since he's been there. They had never really trusted him to get the job done. And even though some people could forget it, Bruce Weber did lead the Illinois Fighting Illini to the national championship game. He has experience, and I don't think he's the best coach in the world, but there are certainly coaches that could be worse than Bruce Weber and everything that he's done so far during his time at Kansas State. So the Wildcats right now, it may be a tough season for them, but I do think as time goes on and these freshmen develop, they could be pretty solid.